Okay, since this is only introduction, I'm going to go ahead and get started. All right, this is from Lifelines, the winter issue, which I happen to be the editor for this book, this paper. So go ahead and subscribe to it. It's free. But here we have a story in the winter issue by Juanita Horst, not a nuisance. I'm going to read just a section of it here. Josh frowned at the row of subtraction problems and traced the lesson number with his finger. But I'm going to back up just a little bit. Here's teacher Sheila. Sheila was not impressed. 9 students would have been perfect. 11 was too many. When the chairman had called to tell her about the 2 new students, she had accepted the news graciously. She had no choice in the matter anyway. He even sounded a bit apprehensive as he explained that the 3rd grader had dyslexia. And her attitude was, a dyslexic could and probably would change everything. Now here's Josh, the dyslexic boy. Josh frowned at the row of subtraction problems and traced the lesson number with his finger. He would never finish before recess. Angeline would. He glanced across the room at her and his frown grew darker. Of course. Her finger was somewhere down on row 3 and her bright pink mechanical pencil kept writing even when she glanced over at the textbook problem. He could never do that. He knew without trying. Suddenly he was tired of it. It just wasn't fair. It hadn't been for a long time. The people had always said, just try, Josh. Must be too blind to see that he was trying. Abruptly, he stood and headed for the door. Josh? The cool voice of his teacher at the chalkboard stopped him short. He turned toward her. She sure is pretty this morning. Not that her curly blonde hair was different than usual, but she just looked nice. Or maybe it was a pink dress. It must be new. But what do you need? Miss Sheila asked, hand poised with chalk. Do you have a new dress? He blurted. 10 little heads lifted from their lessons and gazed curiously at the teacher. Joshua, I asked, what do you need? She looked stern. Oh, he laughed awkwardly. I was going to get a drink. I guess I forgot to ask. Please sit down. You must get permission. Miss Sheila continued writing on the board. Josh sighed and sat back down. That dress was pretty, though. Shrugging, he turned back to the tedious lesson. He copied one, he subtracted, he copied another. He glanced over at Angeline. Sure enough, she was smiling at him. Page finished. He stuck out his tongue and contorted his mouth. Her innocent eyes widened. Her smile faded. He set to writing madly. Soon Miss Sheila would come to check over their lessons and he would have at least 3 wrong, if not more. She doesn't like me. Teachers don't like someone who can't learn math facts, but she likes Angeline. He had seen Miss Sheila's pleased smiles at Angeline's. It just wasn't there. With that introduction, I invite you to share your strategies today. What has worked for you? What has not worked for you? The struggling learners. Or do you have a situation in which you'd like to gain some input from all the wisdom, the collective wisdom that is here in the class? Feel free to share these things, but when you do share your situation and ask for help, be specific. Be specific about what grade the person is in, and if it's a boy or girl. Try to be specific. Describe the situation the best you can, as well as describe the problem. What are the manifestations of the problem? And then we'll be discussing some of those things. So as I've already said in the introduction to this class, we're not going to be getting deeply into technique. But there is a difference between strategies and techniques. Strategies is a general approach to the problem and things you can do in changing the situation. The strategy to do that. Technique is the tools that you use. It's a very specific things you can and cannot do. I would love to be able to just give you a whole list of techniques, but there's so many variables and so many differences and so many different students that we can't really do that. So when you share a technique, just let's all remember that works for you in your situation, that student perhaps, but maybe not in every situation. But strategies should work. in every situation. It should be more general. So that's where we're going with this today. So let's look at the general principles first of all. And I'm not sure that we're going to get through all of this. I didn't realize I was sending them so much stuff to put on the handout until it was too late, and the small little compact books takes up so much space that we'll try to get through some of this at least. So, stay in class with peers if feasible. Discern though, is it the best for the student? Is he too distracted if he stays in class? Is he self-conscious if he stays in class? Can the teacher give a student the amount of time and attention that they need? If not possible, make a nice classroom available, not just a dinky closet with a student stuck back in the dark or something like that. So I have seen special ed situations where the student was in a less than desirable environment. And it just made you sit them back there, make them uncomfortable. It seemed that that is not a strategy that works. So try to have the classroom, if you have to move him out of the class, try to have the classroom in such a way that it's attractive and it means something to the student. Number 2, consistently provide order and structure. Disorder and unstructured in homes, home life, or even school life can aggravate an existing problem or even create additional problems. Number 3, small things might be big in their minds. Okay, I mean, if their pet turtle died, that can be just about as serious to somebody like we're talking about as if your aunt died, or somebody that it really does affect you in the way that you think and act out your daily duties. The pet turtle dying might just be a big deal. So identify their big deals when things like that happen. Number 4, don't let frustration mount. First of all, in yourself and with your student, accept your limitations. You can and won't fix everything, okay? You can only deal with what comes to your classroom. You can't fix all the extenuating circumstances that brought the problems to you. You can't fix all that stuff. We're not a clinic. We're not handing out medicine and fixing problems. I mean, trying to heal everybody and everything. We only deal with what we have when we have the student the 6 hours of the day that he's with us. But don't let that frustration mount up. That is a problem. When there's frustration in you or the student, that has to be eliminated. Frustration blocks learning. It is a mental block that occurs when there's frustration. When frustration is high, learning quits. Number 5, take courage. Working with struggling students is not for the faint-hearted, okay? I applaud those teachers that can just pour out their hearts to the struggling students, and they just take courage every day. Just do it again and again and again and again, all the time, constantly, continually. They are to be applauded. Susan Parrish said, schooling an impaired child can take 3 times the energy, patience, and knowledge, and is not for the faint of heart. Anne Sullivan, in a article also that was in White Lines, talking about Anne Sullivan and Helen Keller, working with Helen Keller, quite an amazing story. But a lot of people don't realize, I don't think they remember or found out that Anne herself was virtually blind. And she had to quit teaching when she actually became completely blind. And so this was the blind teaching the blind. And the courage that woman took to face the problem that she did, to teach a deaf, blind, and mute person to speak, to communicate, to talk, to read, and those kind of things. It's incredible what this lady went through. She literally had to fight with this child. Now, I'm talking about she had to let the child fight and wear herself out so that she could teach her. And she was wise enough not to allow her need to be needed to gratify itself by keeping Helen dependent on her. I asked all her friends, she wrote, to encourage her to tell them of her doings. And introduced many people to Helen and let her teach them the manual alphabet. So she kept working herself out of a job. And it's like, Helen must increase, I must increase. That was how she worked with Helen Keller. Eventually, Anne's energy and her small bit of eyesight gave out. It's the price that you pay for reading all those books to Helen when you should have been resting your eyes, the doctor told her. But don't give up and die, Helen. Don't give up and die, Anne. Helen would be nothing without you. You know what Anne's response was to the doctor? She snapped. Then I would have failed. That's what she said. Her whole life had been dedicated to make Helen free even of her. Take courage. It's not for the faint-hearted, and you're to be applauded for working constantly and patiently with the struggling students. Number 6 is beware of labels. Students usually live down to their labels. You know, we often say live up to their labels, but no, they live down to their labels. So just try to avoid the labels. Avoid thinking that we have to take them to the educational clinic and come back with a diagnosis or something to that effect. Yeah. That really is not all that helpful unless it helps you to understand the student and level with them on a level of understanding. So beware of labels. They stick and are not easily shed. Number 7, don't assume a learning disability if there's simply a learning problem, such as slowness or laziness or mental blocks, undernourishment, physical, emotional, cultural impairments. Maybe English is a second language, or any of those problems that can work into it. That don't assume there's a learning disability or even necessarily a learning problem when there's actually things in the way that could be managed. Number 8, attitude or technique. And for attitude, I always like this soul posture thing. The posture of my soul. How do I feel? That is primary. Struggling students will respond to love, patience, encouragement, and confidence. So this teacher, Miss Sheila, and with Josh, the dyslexic student, she began to realize that her attitude was not wholesome toward Josh. She resented the fact that she had him in her classroom. And she resented the problem that created for her because it destroyed her idea of a great classroom. It was not an ideal situation for her anymore, and it just wore her down. She began to pray. She said, somehow I need to accept him. I'm tired of feeling resentful toward him and being frustrated that I feel that way. I need to love him for real. The Lord answered her prayer. She said, Lord, I need love for Josh. Please, give me love that sees beyond his annoying actions. She began to feel hopeful after she prayed for that love. Here is 3rd grade reading class a few days later. 3rd grade reading class, Miss Sheila announced. Everyone filed to the class table except Josh. He was shuffling through the books in his desk. Need something, Josh? She asked quietly, willing for herself to be patient. He shuffled faster. Papers, pens, erasers, and books. Yes, my reader. Josh's muffled voice came from under the desk lid. Oh, look, it's my flexi ruler. It was lost. The rubbery ruler wrapped around his wrist with a little snap. His tousled head popped out from under the desk lid, and his shining hazel eyes met Sheila's. The very sight of the ruler caused Sheila's heart to sink. It had been a distraction so often to Josh. But she swallowed and smiled. And smiled genuinely. Nice. Uncurling the ruler and sliding it back into his desk, she pointed to the missing reader. Clutching the reader, Josh scurried to the class table and clattered his chair into place. Sheila, taking her place up front, wondered suddenly when God had answered her prayer. For in place of the resentment that would have washed over her in previous days, she felt a fierce love for Josh. He was still disruptive, speaking out of turn and trying her patience to the limit, but he had feelings too. And probably more than his classmates needed someone to understand and help him. Sheila vowed never again to see him as a nuisance. See how her posture toward him changed? Her attitude, her soul feelings toward him changed? And you have any idea what that can do for a student? When he senses that the attitude is wholesome and right toward him, that really do care, instead of caring about my environment, my classroom, above his needs. This is key. Attitude or technique. Attitude is fundamental. Struggling learners have the propensity, number 9. Struggling learners have the propensity to sin, and sin they will. Many will be headstrong and willful. They must learn repentance, Christ-likeness, and godly character. Lack of discipline, guilt, and unbroken wills affects learning ability. So a number of years ago, we were picking up a little boy in town and bringing him to church with us so he could attend Sunday school. His name was Nathaniel Valentine. And so one Sunday after church, one of the Sunday school teachers came to me and said, some money is missing from our little offering basket we have in our little classroom. And they said, we saw Nathaniel go into that room, come back out a little later on, and we believe he probably took the money. And so next Sunday morning, when we picked him up in town, going to church, I said, on the way, I said, Nathaniel, do you have any idea what happened with the money in the Sunday school room that's up in front there? And he said, no, it wasn't me, no, I don't know anything about it. I said, okay, tell you what, Nathaniel, when we get to church, you'd be thinking about it. If you want to talk with me and talk more about this, just let me know. And so what this is coming to is actually the how guilt in a student's life or in his heart, guilty conscience can impair learning. And so what we did is, I asked him again, do you want to talk with me? Do you want to talk to me about that? And he said, no, I don't trust him, wasn't, trust. I said, okay, when you're ready to talk to me, just help him, just let me know. And so we went on in to church, and we went through Sunday school, and started into Sunday school, and then spoken. So he said, I'd like to talk to him. I said, okay, let's we'll talk. So he said, I'd actually took that on me. Don't make it right. Don't punish me. And this was the kind of boy that was hyper ADHD. I mean, he was just all over everything all the time. Previous Sunday, he had been planking himself across the two pews beside us, just right across the top like that. And it was just out of control. I'd tap his leg or squeeze him a little bit, not pinch, but squeeze a little bit. Once in a while, I said, you can't do that. I have ADHD. And stuff like that. See, he was living down to his labels and things like that. And so he said, I took the money. He said, would you like to tell the church about it? Because there's people that know that you did. Would you like to confess that to the church when we have testimony time or after Sunday school? And he said, do that. I can't do that. No, I can't do that. He was 10 years old. I can't do that. I said, well, would you like to talk to Brother Dan about it, our pastor? He said, oh, I can do that. So I went up and got Brother Dan, brought him out to the back, and he confessed it to Brother Dan and forgave him and said, it's all right. Yeah, if you can pay it back sometime, let's please do that kind of thing. So we went back in and sat back down after Sunday school, and before I knew it, he had jumped up right during the announcement time and everything. He was jumping up out of his seat and saying, I've got something to say. He said, I took that money. I'm sorry, I'll make it right. And this ADHD boy sat back down and took it. That was hard. And then I put my arm around him and just brought him to myself. I hugged him and I said, I'm so proud of you. So proud of you. That was one of the best things you could have done. That was great. It was wonderful. I felt him start to relax. That stiff, he was all wiry and stiff, and I felt him start to relax against me. He started leaning over. His head came onto my shoulder. After a while, he was lying down in my arm, and he was stretched out across the pew, sleeping. And the previous Sunday, he was planking across the pews. It's amazing. It's amazing what a guilty conscience can do to a person. And I think sometimes ADHD or ADD and some of those problems that we put labels on can be at least affected by guilt, guilty consciences, or not feeling well about themselves, or telling themselves the untruth, or things like that. So we need to work to relieve guilt. Number 10, sometimes the school is the first to recognize the learning problem because it is the first highly ordered and structured environment that the child has been in. Sometimes parents are slow to appreciate or accept or admit this, especially if there are hereditary implications. Sometimes they're made to feel like they are at fault, so they don't want to accept that their child has learning problems because somehow it reflects on them, because the hereditary or genetic tie, like that. So at least they think that. Number 11, don't think yourself a professional if you're not. Assessments should be by or under the direction of a professional. And number 12, now these are just general principles. One-on-one is only a tool, but it's probably the best tool, but it's often not enough. So just one-on-one attention can fix a lot of problems. Sometimes we busy classroom teachers, we cannot give the proper amount of attention, the appropriate amount of attention to the struggling learner that they could use, and they could well use. So sometimes just giving them, somehow arranging things with your school board or in other ways, so that you can give that child, or someone else can give that child one-on-one attention, that can fix a lot of problems. But it may not fix everything. Special ed teachers, if there's going to be a special ed teacher, I encourage you to get as much training and be equipped as well as you can. And this, an adequate daily preparation is also key. Special ed teachers that are dealing with special needs students or struggling teachers, you can't just walk into the classroom and expect to teach them and help them with this. Help them to reach their maximized potential. I have concluded that special ed teachers need to do more preparation than the typical classroom teacher. Quite often, even if it's just one student, you need to probably think about how you're going to approach these things and how you're going to relate this issue, or even show this problem, or explain this problem, this concept to the student. More carefully, perhaps, even than a typical student needs for class. Any questions or comments so far before we get into the actual strategies here? Okay. Section 2 here, the next section is strategies, a few techniques, and some suggestions. Notice what Joe and Connie Sutton have said here in the book, Strategies for Struggling Learners. Their book is for homeschooling parents mostly, but I thought this was fairly well structured and applicable to school teachers of struggling students as well. Effective teachers of struggling learners do significantly more of the following. They ask more questions. Okay? They allow more trials. They elicit more correct responses to questions. They tell fewer answers so the students can figure it out on their own. They give more feedback, both positive and negative. Right? They provide more support and more encouragement. They deliver shorter lessons. They include more concept examples for illustration. They provide greater lesson structure, like they tell the student more frequently what they're after, what they're going to learn, how we're going to get there, and those kind of things. They provide more monitoring of assignments. So that, in a nutshell, is the strategies of effective teachers of struggling learners. Okay, if you go down to number 5, sufficient rest and vigorous exercise. I think some of us need to get there, so let's stand. Okay, let's stand. Okay, some of you have been to my teacher training, I remember the number 8. All right, so yeah, just look at your fingernail. So make a big finger 8, crossing below your belt. Keep your eye on the fingernail, go about 8 times back and forth. See, it's crossing both hemispheres of the brain. You're going to feel what it's doing to your head. I feel the pull. It's a good way to wake up. And you need your students to do this, especially learning challenge students. Just like figure 8 all the way back around. Watch your finger. Okay, you may be seated. All right, I probably did your 8 times, but that's the idea, okay? Do that and wake your brain up and get people going like this way. We're talking about that, especially in number 5, especially coordinated motor skills exercises like the cross-lateral marches where your right hand slaps your left knee, back and forth, various things like this, back and forth, cross-lateral marches across both hemispheres of the brain. And it's very good for coordination, for developing coordination and physical motor skills. Jumping jacks, cross-lateral marches, Father Abraham, balance exercises, left, right, and things like that. But then let's not neglect also other healthy habits like wholesome diet. Sometimes there can be food allergies or some things that are, maybe there was one student in our school that I had to actually talk to the father about it since I'm principal of the school. It fell on me to talk to the father about their diet. Because this student in 5th grade was after lunch in chorus practice or in program practice, and all the students were standing up and they were singing, he would fall forward and sing like that. And other times, I saw him when I was teaching for 3 weeks this beginning of this term. I noticed about 10 o'clock in the morning, he would get up from his desk and he would just yawning and just dragging himself. And I kept asking him, what did he have for breakfast? Oh, we stopped at the gas station and we got some of these donuts and things like that. And I had pot last night for supper and, well, yeah, I mean, but this family is not from our church, and so I had to approach it a little differently, but I did ask the father to see if he could use something about his child's diet, because it's manifests itself in school. These aren't handy and unfortunate ways. So do what we can to encourage wholesome diet, sufficient rest, and vigorous exercise. That is a strategy. That's one of the strategies. Okay, back to number 1. Break down the lesson into bite-sized segments, say 10-minute increments. Maybe you want to set a timer and say, okay, in this section, you should be able to get this done in about 10 minutes and try to beat the timer or get it done. And maybe you should break down the instructions, like when there's multiple instructions, say like identify the verb by underlining it and then, identify the adjective by underlining it and then draw an arrow. The second set of instructions, draw an arrow to the word that modifies. All right? So rather than confuse him with everything at one time, just do the first thing first. Do the first thing first, go through and underline all the words that are adjectives. And then look it over carefully, come back and give him the next instructions as separate instructions for his work. And then come back and just do the arrows to the word that you modify then. Those kind of things. Break it down to bite-sized segments for the students. What they're doing. I saw some of you agreeing with that. What's been your experience in this way? Has that worked for you? Do timers work for you? For the students some students that are struggling or maybe even lazy, sometimes. Has it worked for you? Okay. Right. Has it not worked for anybody? Have you had situations where it made somebody paranoid or had scared away? That right there. Okay. How about you, Melody? You do use timers?
I have some experience.
Okay.
It depends if the problem is actually attitude or if it's actually
Okay.
me.
Okay. Which way would you say that it's?
Okay, if they actually have a learning problem, honestly, it's
Okay, that's what.
because they can't.
Right. Makes them freeze. Yes. Right. So discern what might be best and how it might work and do well to it. Okay, number 2, modify the learning environment. For example, are the bright colors in your classroom maybe overstimulating your brain? Or maybe the weird colors. Are they overstimulating or making him feel uncomfortable? Like, is red a color you should have for a learning student or a learning challenge student? Probably not. Just various things like that, setting, decoration, noise. Because as much as we think that music, a little music in the background might be helpful for most students, it may not be for every student. It may actually be a distraction for some. So judge carefully on those kind of things. Okay, number 3, don't be too quick to think special curriculum. See if you can customize and modify the curriculum you have. Canned curriculum may not fit the student's learning style anyway. Number 4, discern motives. So this is really important. Sometimes if we're not very discerning, maybe if we're not very experienced, maybe it will be harder for us to discern, but is it disobedience or inattention or disability? Which is it? Is it canned or won't? Which really is it? See, we are working with people, little people that have wills, all right? And if a will gets in the way, it's not broken, not given to you, learning will not occur. Okay, so sometimes it's just that they're scared of what they're going to have to do if they get this. Actually, that's a thought process that some of these students can have. If I get this concept, that means I'm going to have to work the next lesson quickly. Or if I falter on this, I'm going to be able to get some help later on. Maybe mom will help me. And so, you have to get their will. You have to get their allegiance to. Is it can't or won't? Okay, skipping number 5 again. Number 6, when giving instructions and explanations, be brief, clear, and concise. Learning challenge students tend to think precisely and concisely. That is, concretely, not abstractly. They don't do well with reading between the lines. They don't. You have to say what you mean and mean what you say. You have to be understood, be clear and concise. For example, for them, their question, unspoken, but perhaps the question in their mind when they're learning phonics, is what's really long about the long I sound? Why is that long? See? For those of us that we can think abstractly, of course it makes sense because we're accustomed to thinking abstractly. But the concrete thinker, which is often the learning challenge student, they tend to think more concretely. It doesn't make sense to them. That's one reason why Christian Light is developing the program that they are, the Phonics Foundation, is because it's a concrete example. The Orton Gillingham approach to learning is because it's more concrete, it's more direct and understood clearly by those that don't think abstractly. And that's why the Barton program is so successful, often with dyslexia and other things like that, is because it's concrete. It makes sense. You don't say long I, for example. You just use it until it makes sense. All right. What has been your experience in explanations, working with students, keeping it brief, clear, and understood? What are some techniques that you use in that way for break number 6? And if you have some input in this.
Just one that I thought about now, so long and short. I like short, long, short. Just a little, just
Okay, yeah. But see, they might think, I like that. But they might think that if you stretch that, which one is that's a brief thing. They might think if you stretch that straight, it would be longer than, if you straighten that, it might be longer than, so that's the concrete thinker. It has to make sense. Yeah. Okay, any other thoughts? Comments? Okay, very good. Number 7, keep information and learning relevant. Stick to the essentials. Does he really need to memorize the states and counting? Does he really need to? I mean, if it's not going to be on the test, maybe you can customize. Let's say that way. Let's not say fudge or, but you customize his instructions a little bit here and there. Keep information and learning relevant. Stick to the essentials. He needs to be able to connect it with real life too. like history, especially, is going to be a difficult subject for the student that thinks concretely, and for the student that is learning challenges. Often history will be something that's so abstract. It's so not here and now. It's so far removed from us that you'll have a hard time getting through to them to picture. And that's where the creative teacher comes into play there, is to show pictures, show illustrations, do activity play that brings out the historical aspect that you're teaching. And those kind of things that demonstrate it, because you have to draw him in with his interest. Okay, we'll skip number 8. You can read that. Number 9, constant failure has to be avoided. Students can develop negative thought patterns. They must experience the sweetness of success, not just failures, do-overs, corrections, corrections. Success builds success. Keep working with this. Keep working with him to try to develop him to the point, adjust the curriculum where you can to make so that he can feel success. Success builds success. And it is sweet to the mouth of the learning challenge student. It's sweet to the taste of the learning challenge student. Number 10, remove or reduce distractions and remove negative energy drains. Even if you need to sterilize and soundproof the room, kind of tongue in cheek there, but yeah, but you know what I mean. So I had this one student one year that I caught him daydreaming a lot. And I kept wondering what I can do to make so that Greg learns and is interested in school. It seemed like his mind was not here. And I noticed one day, and I kept listening to their lunchtime conversation. This was back a long time ago, when the Dallas Cowboys apparently were just, I guess, they were that big team. I mean, they were, yeah. And he was a fan of Dallas Cowboys, fifth grade boy. Fan of Dallas Cowboys. He was up in Virginia. He was a fan of Dallas. But anyway, I come to find out, I came to examine his desk one day. I saw that he was just staring in front of him at his little cutout of one of the Dallas Cowboy players. Was there a guy named Troy Aiken or something like that? I don't know if it was way back then or not, but some prominent quarterback or somebody, he had him cut out and he's just staring at him. I solved the daydreaming problem by taking away everything like that he was staring at. You know, and I'm thinking about all this thing like that. Negative energy drain is what I call those things. Okay. Remove those things that are distracting to the student and keeping him from concentrating wholeheartedly on the project at hand. Number 11, don't proceed unless or until you have the student's full attention. Maintain eye contact when instructing. This is key. This is really important. Make sure you have the student's attention. Don't just speak to inattentive air. You must have their attention, and especially with a learning challenge student. Insist that they're listening to you and demonstrating. Pencil down, eyes on me. Watch me while I do this. And then get them feedback, what they heard, what they learned, what they saw, perhaps. That will test how much they've been paying attention to you. Maintain eye contact. That is so powerful for the learning challenge student. It also expresses confidence in you. It expresses confidence in you yourself as a teacher. It also expresses confidence in the student whose eyes you're contacting with. And I pay you. You're paying attention to me. And I've got something to say to you. I can help you. It gives that expression. So if you're looking down or out the side or at something else, or that the student's eyes wander, things like that, you're not making that soul connection. It's important, really important. Okay, I think we'll stop there for a moment again and hear your situations, your thoughts about strategies or techniques or things like that that you have anything to talk about. I want to hear from you. Perhaps there is a situation that you feel like no one here has ever experienced. We really want to hear those. Okay? Or maybe you can feel fairly certain that this is going to be a common problem, but because of your inexperience or you're just coming into it, You want to know how to approach it. What are your thoughts? What would you like to share?
Sure.
So I have two high school students who come out of public school and missed a couple of years for strugglers. So they're getting the vocational diploma from COD, and then you can start having friends who some sixth graders and girls, and they're doing that sixth grade language and different things like that. Both struggling and stuff like that. What are tips for high school students to like remembering what the difference in direct object and direct objects, reading social studies, and then read and then remembering, knowing where to find the answers and the lesson, and just lots of things.
Is it fairly comprehensive? I mean, it's across all the subjects.
For one, yes.
When we come, that
Okay, what is your input? Well, honestly, I don't have a lot of experience to share on the high school level. Most issues with learning challenge students are more manifest before than age, but you're in a situation where that's probably when they came to you, right? They were in high school.
yes.
Any input for her? Any ideas, suggestions, strategies? Well, one thing I told the last class is that when you pray for wisdom, if you don't pray for it selfishly, the Lord promises to hear you with it. And that's powerful. If you really think, stop and consider that. And that's local wisdom. That's local applied wisdom that He gives you for that situation. Now, so are they generally well behaved? Son?
Yes.
Okay, so they're studious. They try.
Oh,
They're
yes.
trying. Okay.
They
They care.
They're very motivated. Both just wanting to graduate. Very motivated.
Okay.
Okay. Are they boys or girls?
Want to reach.
One of each. Okay. Okay. Any input?
Like in social studies and science, isn't it often that way that the questions go according to the article that was just read?
You mean in sequence?
Yeah.
Right, so,
kind of
yes,
that,
often.
yeah.
See, I started with the one doing social studies one-on-one, and then I'll have the answer for you and be looking ahead, and then we'll take turns reading paragraphs, and then I'll tell her to stop. Okay, that's one. Now I number 1, number 5, and scout it until that has been taught to me.
Okay. Okay.
It's like right, so it's fresh in the mind. Stuff that 5 to 6 questions that pertain to what we just said.
Good. Are they in with the class, or are others in the class? Taking that say others.
No.
Okay. One thing I'll say for content, subjects, questions like in social studies or history, science, and non-skill subjects like language and math. Be as flexible as you can, as long as you know with their answers. Be as flexible as you can if you know that it's not going to matter for the test. I know I'm not. You didn't catch me say that teach you a test, okay? You didn't catch me say that, but for a learning challenge student, you almost have to sometimes. Is to eliminate everything that's not essential to the test. And so, yeah, customize, modify, especially in the content subjects. Give as much grace as you can for any thoughtful answer, even if it's not the correct one according to the answer key entirely. If it's a thoughtful answer, you can tell that they gave thought and energy to it. Tell you what, be as gracious as you can with those subjects, especially if you have Christian Light Social Studies, grades 3, 4, 5. Okay, any other questions? Or comments to that question?
You said that I have a really good question before the TD. That's a strategy. Like I used to have trouble with my diploma when in public school, and that's something up in school it taught me. So if you couldn't read and then answer questions, first read your questions
know what they are asking you, then go and read it. Sometimes you'll stop in the middle and read it. Oh, yeah, this is that, this is that. And that helps
Right,
me.
right.
I don't know.
Yes. Another concept that another strategy that might work is do as much oral work as you can, so that they can both see it and hear it. If they have a reading difficulty, what they hear might work better than if it's just auditory, or auditory is included. Do as much oral as you can. But I like that, to go over the questions first, especially in content subjects. Go over the questions that evaluate their comprehension of what they read. Go over those questions beforehand. Yeah, good strategy. Okay, any other questions from anybody? What is your situation? What would you like to have some input on?
So I have two different students, both of these are boy students. One's in 7th grade and the other's in 9th grade, and both struggle with their spelling quite a bit, especially with 7th grader. But like a 7th grader, fairly regularly fails spelling tests.
Okay.
And I asked them how they when they write the word, how they write it. And the one is very much one thinks about what the word looks like. I mean, just writes it, and does that look right? The other is much more, I think, like a mental oral speller. Like, I don't quite know how to explain it the best, but I noticed that the way they spell is very different from each other, but they both struggle, and I didn't know if there's any tips to helping them study effectively.
Wow. Spelling. Here we go. Every subject, every teacher. Right. Yeah. Okay. You heard the question. What's your input?
Something our 7th grade teacher did last year. He had them do triangular spelling or something. Like you write the first letter, and then write it again, adding the letter. Every time writing it, adding.
Okay.
The letter.
Okay. So you might take half a page for a wrong word. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Going down.
So they were 7th graders, so they already have pretty long spelling words. And I was a TA last year, so I had to grade those.
I see. I like that because it's repetition. It's repetition. Repetition is often the secret to the security of the line.
Watching it from my fourth with stuff that looks. I told them this isn't how you say a word, but you can break it down like it was spaghetti.
Yeah.
I said that's not the way you say it, and they all laughed, but it's a way for them to remember.
Yeah. Like a separate or separate, and there's always the rat. Separate. Yeah, that's a good one. I always remember that one because it's a common mistake. Goodness me.
One thing else I noticed is that, like, when they retested, that they would often make the exact same mistakes they had previously. This for sure for the 7th grade. It seemed like their studying from what they got wrong was not helpful.
When they get a spelling word wrong, I ask two questions. First question is, do you ask them to have correct spelling in all their work or on down the spelling words?
In spelling and also in history.
Okay.
Also in history. We haven't been doing all their work at this point.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's almost untenable sometimes to require it in everything. But you do want to keep increasing it as they grow older, especially. You want to see correct spelling as they grow on. Another thing, when they do have a spelling word wrong, what is your action? What do you require them to do?
They're supposed to write all the words that they get wrong 5 times.
5 times. Yeah. Okay.
And that's regardless of whether or not they fail the test.
Okay.
Any student that anytime you write it wrong, just write. They're supposed to write each of those words 5 times.
That's good. Someone in the last class, I heard someone talking about using different colored pens. Like that. Was that one of you? Or like different color markers to write the words out, and maybe the different syllables would be different colors, things like that for the visual learner. You see some of those things? Yes.
I have a 7th grader that struggles with it, and that's I just heard that idea a month or so ago.
Okay.
And I was experimenting with it. You write out the word and then take a highlighter and make each syllable a different color. And the reason they say that helps is because one side of your brain processes black and white, the other side processes color, and you're combining the two parts of your brain to remember this word. And I think that was helping some. I'm still experimenting with it.
Okay. Anything.
For the mental as well, what you could try to study is what we call say, spell, say. So you say the word, and then you spell it out loud, and then you say it.
Yeah. Some of the techniques that are used in things like Barton and even Christian Light Phonics Foundation and things like that would be similar. It's just that the say, spell, say. Just you utilize different senses, the different parts of your head, basically. Yeah. Okay, great. Let's move from stuff to class. Seventh grade spelling. Sounds like these seventh graders were. Okay, let's see where we can go from here. Anybody else have any questions or a situation where you'd like to discuss technique or strategies?
One of my boys is really, this is math facts, really good at math facts. And when it comes to these speed drills, he's very fast with them. When he comes to the same math facts in a problem, he can't get it. Like, he's super fast in speed drills and whiz right through them. When it comes to trying to figure out in long division what we talked about it before, is he might sit there for 2 minutes trying to figure it out if he doesn't have a rotate strike.
Anybody else have any problems with something like this? Okay, several? Okay, good. All right. Well, maybe not good, but okay, what input do you have? What have you done with this?
I have a question on more or less the same subject.
Okay,
I'm not
all right.
really good.
Math facts. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes there's an apparent disconnect somewhere. You can't make sense out of all this. Like I was working with a student in a school up in another state. Okay. And the teacher asked me to watch this student work, and I watched him work, and then it was reading class, and he could hardly read. He had really a bad struggle with reading, but he could. So if you're going through there and there's a word that could be substituted with a synonym, he would automatically know what how the sentence was going to conclude, but he would use synonyms for the actual words that were written. When he'd be reading, he'd say, I can't pull up an example right now, but when he'd be reading, he would read the word in the proper context, a sentence in the proper context, but he would not use the words of the sentence. He would use synonyms for the words that could be synonymized. Yeah, it's incredible how the human brain can work. And some of those things like that. So it's in there, but you can't get it out when he's actually using it in problems. Yeah.
I thought maybe it was in speed drills, use time, yes, we have a certain time. So I tried to use the timer on it, and that doesn't get worse on this.
Yeah. And he's probably a fourth grader.
Sure.
Could you do speed drills with long division and you would have a lot of problems on that'd be effective amount?
At least.
Yes. Well, interesting stuff. And I encourage you to, this is a big word, but it's an important word for students who are, for teachers who are working with struggling students, collaborate. Collaborate with others, work together with others. Together we're stronger. And we come up with better ideas as we ask questions of each other. And don't be looking to the experts, look to God. For wisdom, He will give it locally. He'll give it to where you need it at that point. I'm going to just point you to number 12, 13 and 14 yet quickly, especially number 12 and 14. Reinforce with praise. Praise should be frequent, specific, and sincere. Okay, it's not something you just put on to try to get something across, but it should be, praise should be sincere. Look for the little marks of improvement, just the little things that they're improving on, and highlight. Make a big deal about it. Affirm them, appreciate them, and it should be frequent and very specific. At number 13, this is something that I have discovered is important for some children, especially if it's just give them advanced notice when there's a change coming. Don't just suddenly change something because they thrive on routine. And if you break routine, they can become disoriented a bit. So yeah, try it and give them the proper amount of notice. And then 14, avoid World War III. Just don't fight it. Don't fight it. Don't go into war with this whole thing. Take a break. If he's not getting it, stop and try something else. Or let someone else try. Right? Sometimes there is the connection between different people that will work differently than what it does with you. You might let someone else try it. My wife, when she was a special ed teacher, or a helper, I should say, not special ed, but an aide in the classroom, went to help a student one day. It was with her math work, like a fourth or fifth grader, and she got it right away. Walked back in the principal, who was a teacher, her classroom teacher as well, said, "How did you explain that? I tried and tried and tried to get Joyce to understand me." And my wife said, "I just explained it like this," and the teacher said, "Well, I did exactly the same thing." Our conclusion was that she took it off of a woman, not a man, right? So there can be all these little dynamics that can be effective or ineffective, make your work ineffective. If you just need to be perceptive of what is actually going on. What is, some of you were in my class last session, but what is a jigsaw puzzler's worst nightmare?
You missing piece.
One missing piece, right?
Yeah. Right.
One missing piece, all right? So what I saw my mother doing, and I think my wife also one time, you can look at the big picture and say, "Boy, hey, just one missing piece. The puzzle looks great otherwise, you know? But what is glaring to the perceptive person? What is really glaring to the teacher? It's the one missing piece, right? That may be the struggling student. What I saw my wife or my mother do sometimes is just cut it out. Cut out a piece, color it the right colors, and make it fit. Right? That's our job. The struggling students.
Make it theirs.
Maximize their potential. And then on your first page, I think of your handout, you have that draw out your soul to the struggling students. I invite you to just look at that verse and consider it carefully. God bless you. I think it's time for us to go on. Thank you.